you oftentimes get out a bean or two, but like run out of gas. And you're just sitting there like, man, I wish I just had a 5-drop to cast anything that would trigger my beans so I can get rolling. This card not only gets you rolling, it like makes it so that you're never if you have this and a bean out and you somehow run out of gas, that's on you. Hey, I just want to give a quick shout out to all of our Patreon supporters out there. Thank you to the Durdle Maniacs. If you want to be a Durdle Maniac, go to patreon.com/EternalDurdles and help support the channel. It keeps things going. It keeps things updated. Thanks so much for watching. On with the show. Hello and welcome to Eternal Durdles. I'm your host, Zach Clark, and with me as always, Phil Blechman. Phil, how's it going, man?
Zach, I don't know if the spoilers have gotten better, worse, or whatever, but the first spoiler of this season was a game changer, and I can't wait to talk about it.
For you, for sure. I think that let's hold that until the second one. The first one I think we should talk about is Rakasha's Bargain. That is 2 or a black, 2 or a green, 2 or a blue for an instant, a Sultai colored instant that says, look at the top 4 cards of your library, put 2 of them into your hand, the rest in your graveyard. Phil, ostensibly what this reads to me, I think like if you really dig down into like what this card is doing is you're getting an instant speed card advantage card that doesn't draw you cards, so it's relevant in Orcish Bowmaster's world, right? It's also relevant with Beanstalk in 2 ways. One, it's drawing you a card, but a lot of the cards in the Beanstalk decks, Sultai specifically, are Delve cards. This produces 3 Delve mana for your Murktide Regent, your Murderous Cut, what have you. And, I mean, it seems like just a solid value piece in a deck that honestly is not existing right now, but, 10 days left as of this recording until we see a brand new format?
Yeah, we've talked before about how the Beanstalk lists in general, there's been like the 4-color versions with Leyline Binding, and how those were actually just worse versions of Bug Beans, which is essentially Dazed Wasteland and all the good black cards. And if Bug Beans wasn't, like if anybody was still on the fence about Bug Beans versus 4-color or any other type of Beanstalk deck as to which was the actual optimal version, I think this card is just going to like tip the scales over.
Yeah.
Because it's as you said, it's working with all of the cards that the deck already wants to work with, and it like also helps you not only delve fuel for delve cards, but it will find you the delve card while also being an incidental 5-drop at 3 mana. Now the trick is that it's 3 mana, but if you're already in the space where you're like holding up your Bowmasters and you're holding up the Rock Shots,
exactly,
like, it means that you get to play more of the instant speed game. And I think like the only home that I really see for this card is in that deck because of the mana cost that isn't actually the mana cost, triggering Beanstalk. And if there is going to be a world where any form of like good control is going to come back around outside of Swords to Plowshares, it's going to be a Beanstalk deck. And this is the card that like I think we'll be able to teeter it over enough in a way where it's like if you thought Stock Up was good, then imagine if Stock Up, you paid 3 for it, but it cost 5, and how much better that would make Beanstalk.
Yeah, I think this is a spell you want in your deck if you're specifically able to use your graveyard. Like doing this at end of turn, like end of turn 3 on your opponent's end of turn, you cast this and you untap and you're like Murderous Cut that, cast Murktide Regent or something like that, and you're literally netting like this card doesn't just net you the 2 cards that it gets you and the 1 card off the Beanstalk. It's probably netting you 2 more cards off of Beanstalk on top of that, because you're then able to play another 5-drop, right? Maybe you have a Force of Will, you get to counter something that you're drawing a card, then you're casting Murktide Regent. Like this is a ties the room together card. Like this is the kind of card that like if you cast this, it's very likely in a situation where you're not being comboed out in the next turn or 2, you're probably winning the game.
And the other side of it is that like the pros and cons of being blue, right? So one issue with the Beanstalk decks will sometimes be relevant blue count, because all of the actual powerful cards aside from Murktide Regent aren't blue. And so Beanstalk decks can usually get on the cusp of not having enough blue cards. And it's like you said, if you look at this as essentially the role of Beanstalk as the card advantage in the deck. Copies 5 through 8. Granted, it's 3 mana, it's instant speed, and it's entirely different. It's not itself an engine, but you can do the classic Dig Through Time-esque style thing where one Rakshasa finds Rakshasa plus another thing and go off that way. And so, like, you're constantly churning through, so you should never run out of gas. And so the combination between that and Beanstalk means that, like, you'll fewer games where you run into the instance where you just don't draw your Beanstalk and you just run otherwise your tempo deck that gets buried if it doesn't find its engine. So this being, like, as you said, just sort of fleshing out the rest of the show is why I think it's like, it's going to be a powerful card that it'll find that one home. It's got that one home for sure. If it sees play anywhere else, that remains to be, like, seen post bans. But, like, even pre-ban, if it existed now, it would probably be in Bug Beanstalk for the people who are, like, really want to just play in that space as, like, a totally reasonable thing to do. That's, like, actually powerful and doesn't further get punished by Bowmaster, because you're already making the nod to Beanstalk. Beanstalk itself is just so powerful that, like, you try and overwhelm it. But like, the fact that this gets around Bowmaster means that you're not double dipped against and getting punished. You know what I mean?
Well, Phil, the number of times I can, like, count on my in my head playing just the Draco Pack deck that I was running with Beans. You oftentimes get out a bean or two, but, like, run out of gas. And you're just sitting there like, man, I wish I just had a 5-drop to cast anything that would trigger my beans so I can get rolling. This card not only gets you rolling, it, like, makes it so that you're never if you have this and a bean out and you somehow run out of gas, that's on you. Like, this card should not only find you gas, it should keep your hand full for the rest of the game.
Yeah, I think of the fact that this is Dig Through Time plus any value into your graveyard. I mean, I think, like, everybody gets it. This is a card that's going to be a nice role player. But, like, it's not going to do anything that we haven't seen before. It's not novel.
Yeah.
It's just filling out. It's carving its way into a very specific set of things. Of it works with Beanstalk. It doesn't get hit by Bowmaster. It is blue. It is, it has, like, all of these facets to it that like, are scalpeled to exactly where it would need to exist in a format like this. And then we just have to assume that the format is going to be slowed a little bit post bans, because they're going to hit some stuff that make it so that way your instant speed 3-drop that doesn't affect the board can actually be a viable card and not something that you're voluntarily capping yourself with.
This assumes Sowing Mycospawn gets banned, let's be honest.
It's assuming Sowing Mycospawn and get banned. It assumes
some other
that
stuff too.
It assumes that, like, Oops gets tagged a bit. I mean, granted, this is blue, so it'll help with your blue count, but, like, it's hard to not. The first thing to do is shave your 3-drops against decks that you will never see turn 3 against. So you have to, like, be in that space a bit more. Like, the format needs to be in that space a bit more. If the format is still a sub turn 2 format, it's really hard to sleeve up a 3-drop. So, but I think the other thing about this card too that could be interesting that we haven't explored, and I don't know if anybody will. I don't know if it'll be worth it, but the fact that it doesn't require that you be in those 3 colors. Like, you could just pay the 2 mana. You could pay the additional tax.
You could just pay 6 for this thing if you want to.
Well, the trick for that is if there was a deck that was paying some other kind of mana generation, right? Like, the fact that, like, you could be in some ritual space, or you could also be in Ancient Tomb space or whatever, and that like you can manipulate the casting cost. Like, this doesn't read as just Sultai mana.
Yeah,
like, you could get cute with this.
There are decks that this like, okay, let me go with your plan here. Let's say I throw one of these into Cephalid Breakfast, right? I can produce green mana, I can produce blue mana, right? I am a A-B combo deck, right? Like, I could be like, look at 4 cards and be like, oh, there they are, cool, untap, do the thing.
Yeah, at that point you're certainly playing stock up. Like by comparison, if you're doing
instant speed. This is a huge thing. I keep saying this. Instant speed. Instant speed's huge here.
I just mean that instant speed for 4 mana at instant speed, we've had plenty of this effect.
True.
Right, like, we've had plenty of 2 blue do a thing. You have
you can play Factor Fiction.
There's literally a card called I think it's Faith's Ritual. It's a bargain card. and there's 2 blue, look at the top 4, put 2 in your hand and the rest on the bottom. But if you bargain, you look at the top 8 and put 2 in your hand and rest on the bottom. Now, granted, that doesn't have the graveyard synergies, but like 4 mana, look at the top 4 to 5 cards, put 2 into your hand. That's also not new. There's a plethora of that.
There's literally Factor Fiction. Like that is the same card, but you get to see one more card.
There's literally Factor Fiction where you get to see one more card and may not necessarily know. But like I'm saying that there's the offset of like, okay, let's say you are in a bug deck, you plan on casting this for bug, but the fact that it does have leniency on your mana means that like if you were doing something techie otherwise, like there is the failsafe that you don't like like if somebody wastelands you off a color, you would still be able to cast this card if you had, you know, sufficient mana. Like if you cast this for 4, even if they try and cut you off a color, they can't cut you off of this card, right? Yeah. If we're in the stage where you do have the requisite total mana to cast it. So like that's not nothing, right? Like if you're playing Bug Beanstalk and they cut you off of green or cut you off of black, the fact that you can still cast this card, you know, is not nothing if the game is going, if you're playing favorable trades, you know what I mean? Like it's just something to highlight. I imagine not many people are going to talk about that part, but the fact that this card means that like you are going to usually cast it for your colors, but the fact that Wasteland can't actually cut you off of this color wise is a non-zero. Like that will come up. Like you will play, like you play enough games with this, and that will be a facet where you're like, oh, I can just cast this for 4 blue, blue, green, green, and that's good enough. You know,
effectively getting that Homeland's Filterland value out of your color sources there. Hey, Legacy fans, since you're enjoying the show, please like and subscribe to the video. It helps the channel grow.
Support Eternal Durdles on Patreon so we can create even more content and cover events.
Patreons get an ad-free RSS feed, 4 bonus episodes a month, and Discord recognition. Join the Durdle Maniacs at patreon.com/EternalDurdles.
Now back to the show.
So the next card I want to talk about, Phil, is Rally the Monastery. This is a 4 converted mana cost spell. That's an instant for 3 and 1 white. And it says this spell costs 2 less if you cast another spell this turn. Choose one. Either create 2 white prowess monk tokens, or up to 2 target creatures each get +2/+2 until end turn. Or there's a third one. Destroy target creature with power 4 or greater. So Retribution, I think, is the card that is.
Reprisal.
Yeah.
Reprisal.
Retribution of the Meek is the Wrath of God that hits all of those.
It would have been great if it said just tie the room together and say exile. Just keep all of the removal of that. You know, now it's like you're gonna have to keep track of destroying and exiling in your white deck. But this is the card that I'm most hyped up for me personally out of the set. Because putting Monastery Mentor on an instant and sorcery that I can work with Mystic Sanctuary, you know, essentially like give me Monastery Mentor that's a Mystic Sanctuary target is a real delight for me.
And like it has other value. So early on in the game, you can be like, okay, I'm going to use my win condition to get rid of your Atraxa.
Right.
You know, or something,
like and it also falls into the camp that I consider, even though he needs another spell to be cast with it, presumably the format's going to slow down on the 31st, but like this also falls into the camp of like nothing can cost more than 2 in your deck. And if you cantrip into this, it costs 2, right? Like, so if you're on a position, if you're in a pivot turn, and you go, okay, I'm going to cantrip and look for my way to turn the tables real fast. This impacts the board on multiple ways. This also, like, there's something about, like, the white in the color pie that if you look at every single modal spell that they've printed for years at this point, it's always good thing, and then thing reliant on creatures.
Yeah.
And so the thing that is like reliant on your creatures, just like a buff effect or like, you know, deals damage equal to the number of creatures, but it's reliant on you having creatures. It's just like the color pie for mortal spells just requires for some reason creatures at all times on your side of the board. And so that makes it so that like, since blue-black in modern, in like designed for standard and everything are the control colors, white is now like the color of like going wide and needing creatures to do things. It's like much closer to green in that like in order to do anything relevant, you have to have some sort of board presence via creatures. And so for like Legacy Tundra players where you are priced into playing white because you need Swords to Plowshares as just the best removal spell to be available to you, it makes it so that all the modal spells are always like way worse than what they should be. Like, I love me a Thraben Charm. I would love to be able to play Thraben Charm, but one of the modes on Thraben Charm is deal damage to target creature equal to twice the number of creatures you control. Yeah. So if you don't control any creatures, it just isn't a mode. Yeah. And like every time I've ever tried to like make it so that mode does have text, it always feels like I'm making a concession elsewhere because I'm worsening my deck. The difference on this one, though, and why, even though this one does have the +2/+2 to all your creatures pump clause on it, and why, like, that's still the weakest mode, but the rationale to me as to why it's not as bad as all of the previous modal spells that have been creature dependent is because this one does provide creatures itself. So multiple copies can fuel itself. And so if I'm in a Mystic Sanctuary deck that is looking for that kind of redundancy, the fact that the same copy of this can provide the creatures and then also provide a way to like close the door faster, and that mode isn't nothing, right? If I just need to like, if the crux on which the game relies now is on clock after you have mentor tokens, the fact that this is +3/+3 with those prowess monks for 2 mana is really hot.
Let's do the math here, Phil, because we spoke before about you going to time looking for a way to end the game against your opponents. The math on this bears out what? Let's say you have an infinite turn by turn Mystic Sanctuary situation. You can get this back every turn, right? So you cast this, make 2 1/1s. Your opponent's at 20. Next turn, you untap. You can make 2 more 1/1s. So this, let's assume you get to cast another spell. So you attack with 2 4/4s, right? Because you've just prowessed the monks twice, right? Untap, right? And if you just cast this for its +2/+2, that's game.
So I think I mean, the way that you can think about the math is just actually think about what it was like to have Monastery Mentor in play. And if you are Monastery mentoring and you have 2 prowess, you just assume that every single spell that you play is a gutter snipe.
Extra
right?
2 damage, yeah.
So it's like when you're playing a deck that is meant to be spell slinging towards the latter end of the game, where you're playing a bunch of card advantage, and like if all of that also has damage tacked onto it, and then you can essentially pivot by using those resources to continue interacting, then being able to trade all of those cards, you just get to faster pivot, and that's what Mentor's role always was post board. The problem with Mentor in main decks is always that like when you would play it, it was always just the lightning rod for removal, so you'd have to sandbag it until later in the game where you could play plus a bunch of other things. That way you could actually convert some other monks. So that way when the removal targets the Mentor, you would still be ahead on that exchange. Whereas this one is like you can just fire off the 2 monks, and explicitly you can do that at instant speed, so you can catch something on the board. So it has both the removal of like it like there's something valuable to like, if I have this in my deck, it is now nice to know that people who are playing Bowmasters can't just necessarily freely attack.
Yeah.
Right.
And let's not forget the fact that like you could cast this in a turn, hit and attack an Narset. You can pressure your opponent's planeswalkers that stop you from playing the game. I think another interesting part about this card is just being like, okay, it's turn, like compare this to Mentor, right? Turn 3, you and your opponent ends their turn 3, so you have 3 mana out, and you're like, I'm going to cast Brainstorm, and then slam this, right? Untap on your turn 4, and you're already getting the value that you would have had to wait for 2 more turns for a Mentor. Mentor's power wasn't itself, it was the generation of the tokens, right? So if your opponent has to spend a removal card on each of these tokens as you're clipping in for damage on empty board, just because they have not respected your creature plan ever, you put yourself in a situation where now they have to fight a war on 2 fronts, which is something I've been kind of, in my gameplay videos. One of the things that I think makes a deck successful in Legacy right now is fighting a war on 2 fronts. Being able to do it in a way that doesn't tax you from doing that fight. Cephalid Breakfast is a perfect example of that, where you can do the combo or you can play the fair game, right? And your opponent has to respect both eventually. At the beginning, they have to respect the combo, but as the game goes on, they really have to respect your fair plan. And I think this is a situation for Miracles where they have to respect that there are 2 guys on the board that can chip in for 8-9 damage over the course of the early turns if they're not paying attention. And then you're in a situation where, okay, I'm getting this back, I'm casting it again, I'm getting more I think that this changes the dynamic of the Miracles deck a lot. Eternal Durdles is proud to be sponsored by Moxfield. Moxfield is the best Magic the Gathering deck building website on the internet. You can create, share, and find decks from Commander to Legacy, and even fan-supported formats like Pre-Modern and Old School. You can see all of our decks on our Moxfield. Follow the links below to stay tuned.
I think in all of the times when people were like, "Oh, fourth Aerolingus is the new Entreat the Angels," I never really consider that to be true. It was always just a big fireball that just happened to have a busted, uninteractable emblem mechanic attached to it, and so it was better. The trick was though that
sometimes lost you the game.
That sometimes lost you the game. More often than not, it lost you the game. But like it also, the difference too was that when you were in your 3-color deck, it didn't require double pip. Double white is really tough in a world where like your basics just aren't all. You still never were reliable on the board because strip mine is legal in the format.
Exactly.
And so, needing to get double color, and then also like the pressures. Like I find. Like I'm never not going to be a Mystic Sanctuary gamer because it's just the most powerful thing, and that requires islands. So like the where there is strength elsewhere, it's also pulling you away from the things that are double white. So this
Phil,
game
I want to get it. I just don't want to get it twisted real fast because somebody new to the format listening hears you say strip mine is legal in the format. What are you actually talking about?
Sowing Microspawn is legal until
Sowing Microspawn is legal in the format. Thank you. Because someone's going to be like, no, it's not.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, strip mine doesn't also attack you, which
This is true. So it's basically a strip mine with the Mishra's factory attached to it.
It's Magus of the strip mine, yeah. So, but what I think this card does in particular for on the controlling side of decks, and where I think that like I'm really high on this card as the new Entreat the Angels like closer for the control decks that don't want to lean on creatures that aren't like the Snapcaster style, really they're spells that happen to have bodies. It's solving a bunch of problems that the deck otherwise has, and it's only doing it for a single pip. One, it's following the same protocol that I have in a Days Wasteland format that you can't go above 2, especially in a format that's fast. Just anything that's 3 mana is has to be functionally game ending on the spot, or you cannot build it. You like the mid-rangey 3-drops of the world that aren't in some ways game enders immediately just cannot thrive or work in a format this fast. So it stays within that because it actually costs 2, right? It needs another spell, but that spell could be a counter spell, and then at instant speed you fire this off, right? So I could force your thing, and then before you like at the end of your turn, then fire this off for 2 mana. Yes, there is a condition that needs to be met, but that condition is not mana. And that's an important thing. Like if you play something and your condition is paying life, or your condition is cards in graveyard, or your whatever the condition is, if it's not mana gated, mana is the thing that you are capped at 1 per turn. Agreed. You're not capped at other things. Like you can cast a bunch of spells, you can put cards into your graveyard, like all the other facets that they typically use as like threshold conditions. Those are not mana gated, where like everything else is, because you are capped at 1 land per turn. And so anything that is mana gated is essentially asking you for turns, and if you don't have turns, then mana gates become really, really restrictive. And so to not have a mana gate in this spot, it's not like if this said you can, if it costs 1 less or whatever, the fact that it costs 2 less just lowers the threshold of that mana gating in such a powerful way that I think like us talking about it in theory, and then when you see this actually play out in action, you're going to go, oh shit, this is a lot more powerful than I think. Yeah. The other side of it too that's really powerful and is a very specific play pattern, and why I think fourth Aerolingus was just better than all of the other token finishers, if you will, that control players could play, is Teferi Time Raveler is an absolute horseshit card, right? And
for some people, yeah.
The idea that like because Teferi is static makes it so that your flash threats. It like Teferi by itself, in the same way that like Bowmaster says you can't draw cards.
Yeah.
Teferi, in terms of it being something that matters on the board, obsoletes flash as a relevant mechanic, because you have to flash it in with Teferi on the stack, and then Teferi can just bounce it for value, and now you can't deploy that thing at flash because it turns flash off. Yeah. So in that spot, haste was always better. So the haste on fourth Aerolingus, it's like if they went Teferi and whatever, you could just go, okay, I will haste down the Teferi, and Teferi doesn't have the like Teferi can still replace itself, but like if you're then making the haste tokens going up the card, maybe you split the damage and then you take the monarchy or whatever. But like the play pattern of fourth is just infinitely better against Teferi because it turns off flash and you can't miracle with the Teferi on the table. So it also blanks the miracle mechanic. So but what this can do is, in response to Teferi, make 2 monks. Now if they bounce one of the monks and go down to 1, then the other monk is going to be able to pressure that Teferi. Yeah. That's a very, very specific play pattern, but it's a specific play pattern that is the difference between a control game ending effectively right there versus that game continuing.
Yeah.
Like if a Teferi touches the table, it is so overwhelmingly dominant in a matchup that cares about the static that
it also, Phil, saves you in this situation where, like, let's say it's your turn 2, your opponent's turn 3, they slam Teferi against you. You Force of Will, they fall back up with a Force of Will. Now you can cast this for 2, and again keep pressuring them. And I think that's a play pattern that you'll probably end up doing a lot in that particular scenario.
You'll end up doing that a lot. There's a lot of things that Rally the Monastery does that don't jump out at first glance when you read it.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is the implications of like the problems that it is otherwise solving for you that you had to dedicate slots in a control shell to otherwise. For example, speaking of the Teferi problem, it has the main deckable way to solve a Teferi problem. But I always, because I feel like you are so reliant on prismatic ending in this format because you need to take load off of your Swords to Plowshares. Click on the load episode if you haven't watched that one.
Yeah.
But because we needed to take load off of our Swords to Plowshares, you have to play prismatic ending. And then prismatic ending is bottlenecked by it needing to be able to hit 3-drops. And so you have to make a color splash. Now that color splash, I've tried all of the different color splashes, but I always found that every time I moved away from red, I always regretted it because I need to have Pyroblast somewhere in my 75.
Yeah.
Not just because Pyroblast is generically good, because I specifically need to hit Teferi. Teferi, and I guess now you could say Kaito, Bane of Nightmares. But essentially, like
the true Bane of Nightmares, yeah.
The blue Planeswalkers, so like the Teferi, the Narset, the Kaitos, like you needed an answer to that because Prismatic Ending was never enough. Prismatic Ending can't hit the Kaito when it sticks because it's 4-drop on the table. But when you hit a Narset or Teferi at 3 mana, they've already gone up the card, and it's typical that you're not going to be able to fight over it anyway because you can't beat Teferi on the stack because they don't let you play on the stack. And then Narset is going to find the tool that will either protect it or find the thing that will combo off with it. So, and then you spending 3 mana to get their 3 mana. So you're trading down on cards and you're trading at mana parity, which is at sorcery speed.
You're a turn behind at the very least.
You are a full turn behind and you are dead anyway, right? Like even when you do get the Planeswalker off the table, you're already now so far behind because they are up a card and have time walked you in that sense. So it's just not a good play. Sometimes, of course, it's a play you have to make, and that's why you need to have 3 mana or 3 different colors of mana. But like it was so bad that I always felt like I needed to have the Pyroblast as the role to solve that problem. But now that I have Rally the Monastery main deck to be able to be the card that can fight over Planeswalkers, and I know that I can allocate the load of fighting Planeswalkers onto that card, it means that maybe now I can free up and move into other colors to solve other problems that will be present in the new format that aren't red. Like before, Pyroblast was just such a strong draw because it really needed to solve the Planeswalker problem. But now that Rally the Monastery is going to solve the or at least take the load of the Planeswalker problem, it opens up all of this other space that's taking off so much load on everything else that, look, it's not only just taking load off of the Pyroblast, I just don't even necessarily need to play the Pyroblast anymore. That's opening up sideboard slot that then can make me better against, it's just solving a bunch of problems for so many things that you otherwise had to allocate slots to. And that's such a huge deal. And it's doing it in a way, again, like Rakshasa's, whatever the
Bargain.
It's doing it in a way that Bargain is also doing it, where it really is scalpeling in on what the guardrails of the format are. Yeah. It's like, I am slotting really neatly into the guardrails of this format.
The exact tool for the exact deck, yeah.
It's a single white pip. It has relevant text on all 3 parts of the card. It works as it's an instance, so it works with Mystic Sanctuary. It's doing it all in a way at instant speed that your opponent has to respect pretty much at all times. Because if we interact on the stack at all, now it's something else that they have to apply into their calculation, right? Yep. Like it's like you said, if I force your thing and you force back, and then I can deploy this 2 mana instant speed Monastery Mentor. You have to consider that in the counter war now, if you know about the card, right? Like if I force your thing, you go, oh shit, do I force this or do I have to save my force for the Rally the Monastery that they may have on the follow-up, right? And that just adds an additional layer that like now, like, remember what we were talking about of like, there's nothing that players have to respect about control.
Yeah, this is a thing to respect.
Rally the Monastery, at least to some degree now, is something that they may have to respect.
Yeah,
and that's a really nice, refreshing.
And why is that, Phil? because you're fighting a war on two fronts.
So exactly, you saying that? Do you watch competitive chess at all, or do you know about competitive chess world at all?
No, I'm a nerd, but I'm also very bad at chess. I do want to learn one day, get better, but like I don't have the patience for it right now.
Magnus Carlsen is the GOAT chess player, right? Sure. He's been the highest ranked chess player for effectively our entire adult lives.
Yeah.
He's the GOAT, right? He's like you could argue of all time he's the best player of all time.
He's the Eminem of chess.
You have in the GOAT conversation you have Bobby Fischer, but like you have to remove the whole anti-Semitism from his argument as a GOAT. Then you have Gary Kasparov, who was like world champion for
We love a guy named Gary too. Just like come on.
Yeah. Gary Kasparov, and then you have Magnus, right? And those are really the players that like are in the GOAT conversation. I think it's Magnus. Magnus would probably argue it's Kasparov. But one quote that I think about a lot with when sequencing plays or when we look at new cards, some cards solve this by themselves and they're apparent. Other ones don't. But the quote that Magnus had was, the best moves are the ones that do two things. The best moves are the ones that do more than one thing, right? Yeah. Essentially.
Pressure your opponent and protect you, of course.
So there are some cards that inherently do that, and that's why they are so fundamentally powerful in a way that like is so almost boring to us that when we see it on the spoiler, we would go, oh yeah, of course, like that's doing all of the things at once on the same thing, and now it's all these different things that have to be accounted for, and all that was asked was just playing this card. And so in that way, it's uninteresting, but it also knows how powerful something is. I mean, I know we talk about Orcish Bowmasters, but when Orcish Bowmaster hit the spoiler thing, everybody knew that it was a staple.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, there was no argument like, nah, it's not going to be good enough. Like, I don't know, maybe it'll slide it. There was just none of that, right? Because they were like, oh, this thing is fighting on both the board and checking the stack, and it's pressuring, it's doing all these different things, and all it's asking you to do is play the card. The other one is Urza Saga, right? Like, you put the Urza Saga in play, and now you know that it's doing two things. It's both fighting onto the board with all these constructs, and it's going to tutor the combo. By itself, it's doing two different things. But, like, one thing about I really have enjoyed about, like, the theory crafting so far without actually getting to cast Rally the Monastery is Rally the Monastery really is doing a lot of a kind of play that's doing more than one thing, but it's doing more than one thing in a lot of ways that don't meet the eye at first glance. Like, oh, I have Rally the Monastery in my deck, so now I don't need Pyroblast. Like, that's not something that you would immediately think of going through, but like when you understand the load of what each card is responsible for, and then you go, oh, this card can take all of this kind of load, so now I can move that away and do other things that I was otherwise soft to. Like, that's so cool. That's so cool. And like,
I have 2 points. One of them is we need to go to the next card. But before we go to that next card, I want to do a quick counterpoint with an anecdote. Finding the right high-end cards for Legacy, Vintage, Pre-Modern, or Old School Magic can be challenging. That's where our friends 3-for-1 Trading come in.
3-for-1 Trading is one of Europe's top Magic the Gathering retailers with an incredible selection of premium singles, sealed product, and even full sets, all available with free, fast, and secure worldwide shipping.
They add fresh inventory every Wednesday with weekly deals and discounts. So whether you're hunting for that elusive piece of power, a legacy staple, or something spicy for your collection, they've got you covered.
First high-end orders over $500 or 500 euros, use the code EDFREE to get free worldwide shipping.
Check them out now at the number 3, the number 4, the number 1.gg/ED. That link takes you right to the shop and helps support the channel.
Huge thanks to 3-for-1 Trading for supporting the Legacy community. Now back to the show.
About that quote that you said, the Kasparov quote,
the Magnus quote.
Yeah, a thing that does two things. Actually, my counter argument to that is the best card is the one that does something that is not apparent to your opponent. And I can display that by I played against like black white, Death and Taxes the other day, and I'm doing the Cephalid Breakfast thing. I have a Narcomoeba that I just like hard cast earlier in the game on the board, and I have a core sitting on the board as well. I untap and I slam a Nadu. Now my opponent is like, "Oh, can't have that core on the board. I'm gonna play my my Orcish Bowmasters and kill the core." And do you know what I did next, Phil?
Pray tell.
I directed the damage from the core to the Narcomoeba. Which is something people just don't seem to realize. That card has other text aside from just target something for no reason. Like, just doing that, and it was a situation where I could tell my opponent was on the other side of the board going, Jesus, that card has other text! Like,
That's every time anybody has ever attacked in combat against Cephalid Breakfast, and you've gone, okay, I'll block with my Illusionist and bubble it, and you're like, what?
Block with the Illusionist or bubble it, or block with, sometimes you have like a construct that has like an X, a 2-butt, and they attack with their like Orcish Bowmaster token, and you're like, I'll just direct the damage over to this because it's it's tapped or whatever, and then you just direct the damage over to that and kill the Orcish Bowmaster token. There's a lot of like little combat tricks that deck does, but to me, that's one of the best parts of the deck is that it's on board, sure, but your opponent isn't thinking about like, oh, this guy has draft combat tricks,
onboard draft combat tricks,
like onboard draft combat tricks. It's not a thing that you really think about. So it's one of those things to me is like, really knowing your deck and really knowing those little intricacies that like of things like, oh, if my opponent Orcish Bowmaster is my guy, don't put it in the graveyard. Like redirect that damage to the Narcomoeba, and then you get to draw 8 cards because you're going to draw 4 now and 4 on their turn. He scooped immediately. They were just like, oh, never mind.
Luckily for them, they learn that lesson at
Valuable
a local.
Lesson.
That is a useful thing that if you've only ever interacted with the card doing one thing and then all of a sudden you learn that it can do something else, you want to learn that at the LGS and not
you
at the convention center.
Not at Eternal Weekend. All right, so the final card after indulging me on that story, the final card is Mysterized Village. This is a one of the new land cycle. This one is the teamer one because it enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a mountain or a forest. Tap to add a blue mana, great. And then tap 1 and tap it. The next spell you cast this turn cannot be countered. Phil, decks I see this going into immediately are Sneak and Show and possibly is like a one of Encephalid Breakfast.
I think that there is in order to get the uncounterable clause, first off, the comparison that people have been making to this card is the original Boseiju.
Yeah.
But the original Boseiju came in tapped. Who sheltered all. It came in tapped. It only provided colorless mana, and it cost 2 life, and it only worked on an instant or sorcery.
And it only worked on something that had colorless mana.
Right. Yeah. If you couldn't cast like a fully pipped spell, it had to have a colorless mana.
You cannot cast a white knight with
right.
Not that you would, but like
It's like you can't cast Doomsday with Boseiju.
Sure, exactly. Unless there's a Thalia out.
Right. And
who's countering your Thalia?
So the notion that this thing the comparison is that, but the Boseiju, when you filter that mana into the spell, it was a la Cavern of Souls, right? Like the mana just gets filtered into the thing and then it removes the ability to be countered from it, or makes it uncounterable. This one is a gate, right? This is blue tap, so it's essentially 2 more mana to make the thing that you want uncounterable. The trade-off, though, is your Boseiju isn't really going to be casting anything else other than your game-winning spell.
Correct.
And so you're applying it against the control decks that don't have Wasteland or whatever. Where what this one does, and then Cavern of Souls is just a free roll because it's fixing your mana and you're playing creatures anyway. So this is not going to replace the Cavern of Souls because Cavern of Souls is just crap.
Yeah.
But what this is, the interesting space for this one though, is that because it makes blue mana and can cast other things, and then incidentally later on can also blank a Force of Will or blank whatever the thing might fight over in a longer game. There are plenty of times where the decks like Cephalid Breakfast, like you were saying, or any of the other decks where when you play against certain archetypes where you're going to go long, like the games go long, if you are interested in casting only creatures off of your spell, then you're going to go to Cavern of Souls, and this isn't going to replace Cavern of Souls. Like, of course, the Cavern of Souls in Doomsday, the Cavern of Souls
deck,
the Cavern of Souls that's casting the Nadu with the interest in casting the Nadu, like you're not going to go to this when you have access to Cavern of Souls.
Yeah,
but what this can do though is if you are playing the game where you're like, okay, well, I'm interested in the Cavern of Souls slot being the thing that solves me against the grindier decks, and the most powerful cards against those decks are something like the 3-ball Teferi, then you're like, okay, I'll cast a 5 mana uncounterable Teferi because I know that that's going to lock them. Like, but along the way, this thing is going to be casting my cantrips, and this is going to cast my illusionist or whatever when I do try to go for the first round that isn't going to make it through or whatever. You know what I mean? I think that like this is going to be a role player. It's not going to be as good as Cavern of Souls because it's not fixing and is not as cracked, because like typically the decks that Cavern is put in are alongside the Ancient Tomb creature decks.
It's also very soft to Wasteland. It takes a lot of setup for this
this
to work.
Is one of those things. This is the argument of like, Cavern coming into play untapped and blanking the Wasteland. This is good later on if you are casting the uncounterable thing. Like if there is a 1-mana uncounterable 3-drop that matters, and that can also be like, there can be the situations where like this thing can make your Force of Will uncounterable in the late game when you're or your Pyroblast or whatever. Like it can also make your 1-mana spells just win the counter war outright by sinking 2 mana into it, which when you get into those positions where you're going to have a heavy stack fighting over the one thing, this thing can both either protect that thing, but if you want to convert, you can also try and catch the stack and put the first thing that you put on the stack as the uncounterable thing to like ensure your thing sticks and trades for their card. So there's a little bit more play there. I don't think this thing replaces Cavern of Souls, but like, will it show up? Will it show up in role playing numbers? Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I see this as a card that like I would think about in my sideboard against decks that like have a high counter count that I need to deal with. I might side this in as an extra land.
Yeah, I think that also if the requirement of a mountain or forest isn't asking anything of you that you aren't already doing. So like, for example, Encephalid Breakfast, if you're playing the main deck, if you're playing the main deck Cavern of Souls, I could see a Breakfast player being like, you know what, I'm going to use this card instead of the main deck Cavern, because main deck Cavern is going to be dead until the combo turn, in terms of like doing its job, like what its load is. Whereas the other card is like, well, if I have a Trough in play, then this thing comes into play untapped, and then I can, actually still churn through my deck in a reasonable way. And you're not losing the color requirement, because if the Cavern of Souls was in that slot anyway, that Cavern of Souls wasn't casting your cantrip or whatever. Now, this thing isn't casting your Nomad's Encore, but like that's where the tension is, which I think is good. It's good to have tension in choices. But I think that like
Cavern is also not casting Nomad Encore. Like I don't think I've ever been like
it's always on Wizard, Cavern. Right?
Yeah, it's always on Wizard.
But like I think that this is in the space where like the more main deckable version of the card, that if it goes long where uncounterable is a valuable tool to have, then you do have access to it, even if it is a couple turns later. But the decks that you typically would need that against are going to allow for those 2 turns to happen, where you can get those additional land drops. But then in the offside of it, for Cavern, that is dead early, that you are, it's going to be the first card that you board out against faster decks. You still have now a blue producing land on your turn 2 after you've put a Trop in play that can still make it so that you can operate early, or, be able to deploy all of your tools in the timely manner that you need to. So I think that like, of course this card is good. We read uncounterable on a land, and we know that anytime you can blank a large swath of
lands
card text,
already being uncounterable, adding uncounterable to things is pretty good, right?
This thing has there is a precedent for this type of card obviously being very good. And outside of Cavern of Souls, which is just the worst, most disgusting version of thing that they can do, but like all of the Cavern of Souls and its ilk have all had what's the word I'm looking for? Like prowess and legacy before. Like they've all shown that they are good and have seen play and will continue to see play. And sometimes you see the original Beseiju still show up every once in a while. Like I mean, there are still some number of show and tell players that play it alongside. Now they get to like have uncounterable stock ups and shit. So like it is still not a wild card to see out there. And I think that this being one that can offset the downsides of being good early versus those other ones that are not, this will see play. Will it see a ton of play? No. Will it see play? Yes. Is this a card that you will just know all of the text of naturally as a entrenched legacy player? Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, those are the 3 cards that we like from some initial spoilers. We're going to do the full set spoiler once the spoiler set thing releases completely. But thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, comment below if you think that there's a card that's been released so far that we should be talking about, so that we can remember to include it on the big episode. And thanks. Have a good one, everybody. Before you go, I need some help. Please subscribe to this channel and do your part to help sustain the Legacy content ecosystem. Just subscribing to this channel goes a long way to reminding YouTube that people love and support this format. Now, if you really want to go the extra mile, you should think about supporting us through Patreon. Both the links for subscription and Patreon are right here. And if you're listening on an audio format, you can go to patreon.com/eternaldurdles. Thanks so much for watching.